Alright, welcome to this video. This is part 2 of the video I was trying to do outside and I ran out of room. I was right in the middle, so if you haven't seen these videos before, welcome. I invite you to go back and watch the first video that I will probably post at the same time as this because the conversation overlaps. I'm just going to go into a little flow with my guidance team, aka my higher self, and just bring through the messages that I feel guided to share. And moving into this continuation, one of the biggest messages that was coming through is we are the technology, we are the science. Things are shifting and things are changing. And from a 3D platform, we cannot see necessarily because we don't have eyes to see. So once you wake up, there's levels of awakening, and I talked about this in the previous 2 videos that I did in just conversation. This is going to go into an inflow message. But our eyes to see, the more we wake up, the more we see from a bigger perspective. So that's what my guides were essentially talking about. They were basically saying something along the lines of everything is changing. So our timelines are changing. Therefore, our history is changing. And I'm not going to get into that too much, but everything is happening now. If we change something now, we can literally change the past and we can change the future to a certain extent. Obviously, we can change the future, but it's hard to explain unless you see it from a multidimensional perspective. There is a ripple effect that goes forward, backwards, out, sideways, parallel, past, present, future. It all is connected. And what the guides are essentially sharing is that now, because we have created such a ripple effect, the knowledge that was lost is going to be bubbling up to the surface. And science does not have the vocabulary, which is where I'm going to lead into this, to explain what's going on, because they're still trying to explain things from a 3D, 4D perspective. And the scientists, the more that they can get into a place of their own heart expansion and coherence, the more the mathematical equations that are not adding up or that have had holes in them will start to realign and refold, so that all of a sudden they'll say, oh, wow, we were trying to put these 2 numbers together and there was just a slight miscalculation that kept us from getting to where we wanted to go. And now, because this new energy is coming in to shift all of that, those pieces are going to start falling into place. And that's just one perspective. This has to do with economics, politics, government, which is the same thing as politics, our social system. But science is what's coming through. So I'm just going to go back into flow. Part of what I was saying got cut off was about the demolition of the old. And it's a big play on words, and I'll have to go back in and kind of maybe type some of this up. But so I'm just going to stay in this energy for just a moment and get back into that space of just kind of allowing that higher knowing to come through. And as we attune ourselves with the other word that was coming through a lot was democracy. So it's a big play on words. As we tune ourselves with the higher democracies, as we allow ourselves to see through the demolishing, the demolition derby, we are recognizing that the game is now being introduced in a new rule spectrum. For all of the spectrum analytics, all of the analysis, all of the analytics are based on old perspectives, perceptions, and preceptions. There is an unfolding of events that is essentially allowing for the flower to express. I'm seeing it, flower unfolding, and I guess it's the stamen coming out, and pollen being expelled from this flower, and all of the people are smelling it and waking up, or it's stimulating the DNA. So this is a play on not only the visualization of how the awakening is happening, and you could think of the flower as a lotus flower or a lily with the stamen coming out of the center. Obviously, I'm not a botanist, or an herbalist. I mean, sometimes I feel like I am, but the wording is being played with right now so that we can play with that as well. But this is happening on a grand scale. And the energies that are coming in are stimulating our senses. And so we are being invited to see into our extrasensory capabilities to understand the stand in which we must take. The standing. I'm hearing the last stand. I'm hearing, what is it? Stand up, stand up, stand up for your rights. But I'm also seeing that others just holding steadfast and standing in their own technology, in their own expansiveness and expression. So there's layers, and all of those layers are necessary right now in order to create a new bandwidth. And I'm hearing a time band. So I'm seeing a band kind of coming together and attuning to each other's instruments. And while each one is part of the band, they also then leave the band and each have their own separate timelines. So that's how this is working. It's like everything is coming together in this convergence, yet each individual is still expressing in their own timelines. And that's where sovereignty and free will come into play. And as we allow our expressions to expand into a new time zone, to zone out, if you will, of the old frequencies that we're attempting to zone, I'm hearing zombie us in, we wake up to the new sensualization. I'm seeing a reference to the divine feminine. I'm seeing a reference to the deliciousness of life, the sensuality, the sensibility, the extra sensibility, the sense and sensibility, that all of this has been covered up, so to speak. And as we unfold, as we pull off these certain, I'm seeing people being plugged in and pulling off the feeding tubes. We recognize that what we have been feeding into has created a system that no longer fits or conveys that which we wish to understand. For it is attempting to convey to us a reality system that we are awakening to that is a falsehood. And as we come into this new falsehood, this I'm seeing like this false figures that have been hooded. Some of these figures will pull back their hoods and they will be like a Robin Hood figure, and others will pull back their hoods and they'll be like, what's that figure from Star Wars? the bad guy from Star Wars with the can't remember his name. Not Darth Vader, but the other guy that's above Darth Vader. Anyways, you get the picture. And so as these hoods are pulled back and we are no longer hoodwinked, if you will, into realities that are not cohesive to where we are it's no longer binding us. So the boundaries that we had, we're now stepping across them, through them, and over them. For we are seeking into expression of our boundless expression. And as we allow ourselves to open and convey to one another, stepping off of the conveyor belt, if you will, into a new time belt. And I'm hearing this as like, it's like we're stepping out of something having to do with Orion's belt and we're coming into another belt of lineup, like a bigger than that. I'm hearing pull up your pants. So it's kind of like they're saying, put on our big girl and big boy pants and don't be afraid to play with the big dogs, yet play is a key word. So we still have to hold on that little inner child element so that we can focus on our stability, because we cannot be too serious. I think this is also a play on words having to do with serious. Too serious. We must open to our expansiveness and our multilinguality, multidimensionality, multiple linguistics, our multiple layers that are hatching. And as the hatchlings are coming out to play, we are also closing out old chapters to things that have been hatched and this is a play on words. I'm seeing cross-hatched. I'm seeing a reference to plans that were hatched but hadn't quite, they weren't, and this is a layer. So 3D is like dark things that were hatched. But then there's new hatches that I'm seeing that are like Easter, that have to do with Christ and Christed consciousness, that have to do with these new little ducklings or chickadees coming out. And I'm seeing these also has to do with old chapters that are being closed, with things that we're trying to cross. It's like this crosshatch, this writing over these old constructs, but we have to recognize what's underneath them. As we allow these things to play out, we strengthen our resistance. I'm hearing vive la résistance, but also our resistance to dis-ease in the body, dis-ease of the mind, dis-ease to the architecture and the structure, dis-ease of the soundology that we have all been feeding into. This phase of entrapment has lost its chemical abilities to hatch more in many beings. And this is all a play on words. It's a multi-layer frequency. So it has to do with our chemicals being played with. It has to do, it's like we're recognizing that this is going on. And we're, I'm hearing undermining, outweighing. We're creating a certain geometrical structure by us being in coherence, by us being awake, by us paying attention to our feeling and our extrasensory abilities, that stuff that used to be able to, back to the words I used in my first video, deconstruct, are now actually helping us to construct and to put the pieces together. So we are taking from this deconstructing, and this is a play on words, so it's like pulling apart the old, but we're also deconstructing it and taking it back to the simplicity of it, the base molecules. We are rearranging those particles in everything. This has to do with what we're seeing in front of us and within our bodies and within our creative structure. So for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, this will be an easier process. For those that are just opening to their expansiveness, this will seem confusing. And these are all honored. These pathways in the body, in the physical, in the realms that we are cross-hatching through and over, that we are, I'm seeing splitting hairs. I'm seeing this, the 3 hairs that are combining their ears all put together because it's a slip knot. It's a, I always forget the name of it, but coherence basically. It's the infinity symbol. As we come together, it's like this time loop that comes into as a toroidal donut, essentially. And as we move together in this new wave particle exchange, as we wave at the particles that are no longer participating, that we no longer participate in, I'm seeing particles. I'm seeing lots of plays on words with that. We're like parting the ways, and we're saying no longer are we going to do that. You have to fit into this higher frequency. We're not conforming to this old concept of even particles and waves. We are no longer conforming to the ways that we have been taught that particles exchange information. For that was, again, laid out based on an old chain lineage of presentations, of teachings that has served its purpose in a very beautiful and divine way, and also a lower frequency holding pattern at the same time. We are reconstructing that, and we are allowing that to fall away as we slip into the higher. I'm seeing Nottingham, so many different words are coming through. Subnomature, subclamature, subterranean vortex field that is breaking away, that is departing, if you will, that is creating this partition that we are then seeing the divide. And it's very clear to us the side that we want to bond with. So this has to do with chemical bonding, this has to do with cohesion, this has to do with stepping out of taking just one side or the other. It has to do with seeing the side that we are really tapping into and then coming into a cohesion to strengthen that side, but it's less duality and more of a cohesive structure. For all that resides within us is opening and wishing to be expressed. We invite you to dive into the wishing well, into the deep structure of the realization that you are full. I'm hearing wishes fulfilled. It was an old book by Wayne Dyer. Wishes fulfilled. So it's like what we have been asking for is fulfilled. So recognize that we are already in this and we are creating from that space. And that is a part of that law of attraction, wishes fulfilled. So we have essentially sent out this call, dropped our pennies into a wishing well, and through this we are creating from the structure. And I'm seeing this plasma exchange that we are all playing with. And we're creating from this new space, those of us especially that are awakened. And then we are essentially pulling others to this side. And it's not meant to be said like his side versus her side, or a black and white. You know, it's like, okay, this was dark, this was light. Let us merge so that we can dissolve that really heavy, dense shadow that wasn't allowing the light to trickle in. It was really blocked, because that is like 2D, you know, 3D, and that can no longer hold. It's too dense. So we invite you, I'm seeing people like knocking here and like, wake up. I'm hearing a reference to the woodpecker is calling. Like, wake up, step out of the density. And as we do this, as we play within this new field, as we play with these new volumes of energy, these new volumes of information that are coming in, we then play with a cohesiveness that is bonding and binding us to a DNA expression of extracellular mobility. And I'm hearing extrasensory mobility, the ability to move, this communication, if you think of a mobile network, rather than a technology-based communication system that was draining the architecture, that was a closed unit system. We are now expanding and opening to a new wave of technology that was held back because of an old system of, I'm seeing, monopoly. So this is exciting news. I'm going to go back into flow, and then we're going to end on this note. While this continued collapse shows up in your reality and awareness in our field and exposes itself, as more and more exposures are, I'm seeing a camera, and it's like a picture with a flash going off. So this is a big play on words. I'm seeing that as this exposure happens, like, you know, when you take a picture and then you look at it later and you see something in the picture that you didn't see the first time and it was hidden, that's what's happening. And it's flash, flash, flash. All of these exposures of this, and they're showing me it's an old camera that captured a certain amount of energy and a perspective and a frequency, and that's all being exposed. Once you've developed the picture and you're looking at it, you're seeing a reality that's already happened. So this is all exposure, and this is already the past. So we are already in this process of opening up and jumping off of that conveyor belt and conveying, being the new information that is being conveyed to us. And there's just a lot of play on words. I'm hearing buoyancy. Okay. So as we open to this energy, and as these flashes happen, and by the way, this is literal as well. So we might be having literal flashes. I've had it. Have you ever had that where you've woken up and it's like, what just happened? You think that somebody flashed a light in your eyes, and there might be having people having flashes that aren't literally seen, but they're flashes of information that burst in, flashes of understanding. I'm getting goosebumps. flashes of knowing, flashbacks to a moment in time that we recognize as a huge either moment where we fell asleep, moment that we had ignored, moment that we had been aware of but we chose not to focus on it, or a moment of awakening. So there's all of these flashes of information that is literally funneling into us right now through the sun, from the earth, through the planetary alignments, and something about the belt that we're in as well, timing belt. That is essentially like so much goosebumps, you guys. Pay attention to that. The goosebumps are major. And it might make us feel sick, nauseous, nauseated, because it has to do with so much. It's like going on a roller coaster, right? Or recognizing something that we really didn't like. That nauseousness can happen from that. It can be a nauseousness because we're getting used to the acclimating to the newer energies. It can be because we're having equilibrium imbalances, because it's hard to equalize when we're in this multidimensional field and awareness. So be patient with ourselves and recognize that so much is happening. And I'm going to end on the note of care for our bodies, care for our technology, and care for one another. The more we can continue, this isn't over. This is just beginning. This isn't over. We have so much more that is in the process of collapsing. And we must really find our harmony and our stabilization, and not just pretend like everything is. It's never going to be what it was, because we are no longer playing in a 3D, period. So the more we can honor that and be patient with ourselves and with one another, yet create. Don't hold back. Now is the time to move with what we feel passionate about, what we feel compassion for, what we feel inspired by, what we feel into, where we're drawn to go, right? But also paying attention, and not operating from, it's not just boing, 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 boing. It's stop, breathe, hone in on what we're feeling. Does this feeling come from fear? Am I being guided to just move because I'm afraid? Or am I being guided to move because I'm being called to this place on earth? It's two completely different reasons and realities. And that is our responsibility, our ability to respond to what our higher guidance system is telling us, is showing up for us through synchronicity. So sometimes more synchronicity can be brought to us out of fear, but then once we integrate that and digest it, we can see through it and go, oh, okay, I really just wanted to move away because I didn't want to deal with what I was afraid of, but I really do love it here, for example. Or once you digest it and integrate it, you can say, oh, I don't want to leave this job, or I don't want to run away because I'm still needed here and I still feel good. It was just a momentary process that I had to work through. This can have to do with relationships. It can have to do with all kinds of things. So that's a whole other video. In love and light, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Namaste.